So this conversation originated with our introduction to Donna Morton of Change Finance, who is the CEO of an exciting company that is now has developed a new financial product, an ETF, yes, that supports a different approach to how investment should activate your intention in the companies that you are putting money into, so that your values can be better reflected in the work of those companies that are taking your energy, your money, your attention, and putting it towards something that you really ought to be in alignment with. And so when we first met, we were talking about the launch of this financial product, and that launch happened last month, as I understand it. And today, they officially brought the product to the New York Stock Exchange and rang the bell this morning. And what's exciting in particular about what Change Finance is doing, as I understand it, and I'm going to fumble this, I'm sure, but as I understand it, traditionally, to invest in alignment with your values required a certain amount of capital. That if you wanted to do this, you better be ready to, be capable of putting up a good amount of money. And the instrument did not exist for you to maybe put in what many of us, many people who are here and out on the street are probably thinking a more reasonable amount of money in, say, 25 to 50 to 150 bucks, if you wanted to do that. And that's what's exciting about what they have done, is they've now put together for the first time that kind of ETF. So we invited Donna here and Hunter Lovins, who is the visionary officer. No, that's not the right title. Chief Impact Officer of Change Finance. Chief Insurgent?
Chief Insurgent.
Okay, that's a good one. Hunter, as many of you know, is the author of Natural Capitalism. It is an co-author of Natural Capitalism. It is an extraordinary honor to have her here in the space. I just had her sign my copy of the book upstairs, and now I'm going to enshrine that. And she's such an extraordinary pioneer in exactly this kind of work. So to have her here to be part of this conversation really means a lot. And Todd Shaw is also here from Morgan Stanley, where he specializes in socially responsible investment in the Shaw Group, and he's also a senior vice president of Morgan Stanley. And he brings an extraordinary perspective and depth of understanding about exactly this territory we're talking about. And Rodrigo Nino, aside from making this amazing building possible for those of us who are part of this community, and the other two that are soon to follow at the Assemblage, is one of the really remarkable experts in crowdfunding, particularly in the area of real estate, but crowdfunding as a way to bring a different kind of intention and energy into the creation of new business endeavors. So Rodrigo's going to be talking about how to scale scale crowdfunding as part of this conversation. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton to Donna, who can talk a little bit about Change Finance and what these guys are currently up to.
So it was kind of a big day. It's not every day that the New York Stock Exchange is flooded with women, with young people, with people of color. It was actually really, really beautiful. We sort of walked onto the floor, and I was telling friends, I had a little bit of a moment where when we first hit the floor, it felt like, oh, this feels a little bit harsh. And there's lots of men in whites, in blue and black suits, and it feels a little alien for just a split second. And then I had this other impulse, which was, this is the time of the fierce feminine, and this is the time to really own it and own the space. And it was kind of transformative. And when we were up in the box looking down at the beautiful collection of people, it really felt like the rise of something very different. And we had friends in the room that were chanting, "What do we want?" And so in some beautiful way, our community turned the New York Stock Exchange into a rally about the future that we all want, and it felt really gorgeous. So I just wanted to start there. So I'm a really unusual CEO in the finance space. I started my career working for Greenpeace. I went to jail every 5 weeks. I was chained for 2 years. I was chained to oil drilling vessels, chemical plants, you name it. And it was an incredible experience learning how to say no, how to use literally the one power I felt I had as a 22-year-old woman, which is the power of my body to stop the things that I thought were the most egregious. And then over my career, I feel like I've sort of evolved into a deeper and deeper form of yes. And that's what it feels like change finance really is, this manifestation of yes, where the generative impulse of entrepreneurs, good businesses, good companies creating good jobs, they need way more capital. So this idea that there's this debate about do we grow the economy or do we shrink the economy, I think is also the way Rodrigo was describing. It's not a useful story right now because there's aspects of the economy that we need to grow like crazy. Organic farming, good housing, just workplaces, right? We need lots more of that. What we don't need is child sex trafficking in the hospitality industry. What we don't need is slavery in food, in manufacturing, in making phones. What we don't need is a fossil fuel economy that's literally destroying the life support mechanism of the planet. And what we do need is clean, abundant, radiant energy. 1 hour of the power from the sun powers us for a year at our current consumption rates. It's all about how we accept those gifts. It's about how we manifest money, how we move money. So change finance was built to literally move money from harm to healing, to consciously design financial products that are, for one, cheap like borscht. Our product costs as much as a pizza. It's less than $19. It democratizes deep impact. It makes impact investing available to just about everyone. And I grew up as a working class kid, so I'm not a typical finance person. And so I care that the cab drivers that we ride with on our way to events, sometimes twice actually in the last month, cab drivers that have heard us talking about what we're doing got on the phone and called Robinhood or their broker and bought our product live while we were traveling in the car. I want us to be that kind of finance company. I want us to reinvent what finance is. I want us to invite people that have been left out of the market economy to feel like they have absolutely a right to walk in and touch the power of money, because money's an energy. It's a big energy, and we have to wield it really prudently and really judiciously, and we have to render love into finance, right? We have to be whole, conscious, loving beings that have decided to work with the power and the flow of money, because I believe that money and finance is the mother of all human systems. There is nothing that humans have ever done that is bigger, faster, more global. There's nothing we've ever invented as humans that is as awesomely powerful as the market economy, the global financial system. And so right now, when it comes to things like climate change and extreme poverty, there is no tool more powerful than the power of money, than our collective power. But that means we need to be literally the biggest we in human history. And we can't be the one against the 99, because I also have experienced some of the most beautiful human beings. I'm Canadian, but in Canada, the US, Europe, I've met beautiful people from really wealthy families that actually want to, I would say, rejoin the human race. They really want to feel part of the 100%. They don't want to feel like their money causes them shame and pain and separates them from everybody else. Just like some of the poorest people, I worked on reservations in Canada doing solar projects for a long time. And I met a lot of people who are made to feel shamed because they have no money, because they feel like the money system has abandoned them and left them out. And so this is this incredible moment in time where we get to reunite the 1 and the 99 and be 100% of humanity standing up to stop slavery, stop sex trafficking, stop extreme oil and climate change, and start an economy in service to life. I'm gonna stop and hand the mic on.
Damn, and I have to follow that. First off, I am so honored to be in service to you, my sister. And I'm honored to be here with some dear friends. There are people sitting in this room, the Davidsons, for example, without whom change finance would not exist, who believed in Donna at a time when she was down and said, this needs to happen and you can do it. So today, ringing the bell on Wall Street with Jim and Melanie, with so many of you, was truly inspirational. And as Donna said, as we walked onto the floor, women, people of color, young people, wearing a goddamn cowboy hat. And we belonged. And the New York Stock Exchange had invited us. And smart of them. Rodrigo said we're in a time of crisis, we're in a time of profound transformation. We're in a time of changing stories. Thomas Berry, the great theologian, said, we're in trouble now because we don't have a good story. And half of my work is working with an international team that is seeking to build a new story of an economy in service to life. And I had to choose to be tonight in Vienna with the Club of Rome, of which I'm a member of the executive committee, or here with you, and you can see what choice I made. Yeah. But as we speak, actually not, because they're all in bed now. Earlier this morning, for us, a team of some of the world's brightest people were gathering. We're building a new organization. We've combined a group called the Alliance for Sustainability and Prosperity that grew out of work we were doing for the King of Bhutan, taking the concept of gross national happiness to make it the basis of international development. A group called Leading for Well-Being, again, another international group of academicians, business leaders, theologians, a wide array of disciplines, asking how do we build an economy that puts human dignity at its core, that puts the interconnectedness of who we really are. The narrative that rules us now, and if you've had an economics class, this is in your head, that we're greedy bastards, but that's okay because the market is perfect, and in a perfect market, me against you will lead to the greater good for all. Yeah, bullshit. It hasn't. It has brought humanity to the edge of a cliff. Peter Turchin up in Connecticut says humanity collapses within 10 years. You okay with that? No, I'm not. So what would a story be that, as Bucky said, works for 100% of humanity? And we think we are pulling the threads together. A man named Dr. Paul Lawrence at Harvard said when the pre-humans came down out of the trees in Africa, we were naked, our claws aren't worth much, our teeth are pretty inadequate, we're not as fast as a lion. You are here because those pre-humans not only had a drive to acquire and to defend what the neoliberal economists say is what humans are. We bonded. We worked together. Those first pre-humans cared more for the good of the whole than any one of them did for their own self-interest. There were apparently a bunch of tribes of pre-humans. They all went extinct, except those that led to us. We know this from the DNA. We know this from the archaeology. They were apparently down to fewer than 180,000 discrete individuals, the number now of endangered gorillas. And we are here because we bonded and because we told story. Humans love to create. We're entrepreneurial. We begin again. We create anew. This is what it means to be human. So what would an economy be that is based on this more scientific understanding of what it means to be alive? Let me pivot and talk about what is both an incredible opportunity and a bit of a threat. I worked with a man named Tony Seba, Stanford professor. Tony says, inevitably, because of four things, by 2030, the world will be 100% renewably powered. Four things are fall in the cost of solar, fall in the cost of storage, batteries, the electric car, and the driverless car. Tony said this mashup of technological innovation with business model innovation is going to drive to this outcome because it will create a tenfold drop in the cost to you of what you want, which is to get from here to there, to have comfort in a building, to have illumination. Wherever in history there's been a tenfold drop, you get this kind of utter disruption. Now, if Tony's right, we are looking at the dissolution in value, probably the utter dissolution in value, within about 10 years of the oil, gas, coal, uranium, nuclear, utility, car industries, the banks that hold paper in them, and the pension funds that have invested in them. Good morning. I've been saying, based on the work of Carbon Tracker in the UK, a really bright man named Mark Campanelli, and the work of John Fullerton. John was for 18 years JP Morgan, left, created Capital Institute to try to transform finance. They reckon the stranded assets on the books of companies and countries that are now dependent in the fossil fuel industry is $20 to $30 trillion. By comparison, the 2008 mortgage collapse was over the stranded assets of 2.7 trillion. So we're looking at an order of magnitude greater collapse within the next 10 years. Do you really want your money in fossil companies? No. Now notice, I am not talking about polar bears. This is not an environmentalist rant. This is pure business, this is pure economics. And if Tony is correct, it is coming at us like a freight train. Now, I was just with Mark in Italy. I literally flew in yesterday from Italy. And Mark said, Hunter, you've got it wrong. I said, please tell me. He said, it's 100 trillion based on Citigroup's latest reckoning out about 2 weeks ago. He said, what we didn't count was the foregone revenues of those fossil assets. Okay, we're looking at a $100 trillion collapse within the next 10 years. It is going to take the creativity of all of us to figure this one out. So I've been going around asking folk, is Tony right? Fall in the cost of solar. The Saudis just claimed world record low price, 800 megawatt solar field at 1.7 cents per kilowatt hour. What do y'all pay? 18, 20?
11 in Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle's got Seattle City Light. But even there, 11's a little more than 1.7. Fall in the cost of batteries. When the Aliso Canyon well blew out in Southern California and they lost all of the gas storage, Elon Musk said, it's okay, we'll put up batteries. So in 6 months' time, and at the cost roughly of building a gas peaker plant, which would have taken several years to build, he put in 80 megawatts of utility-scale battery storage. The minute the winds stopped after Maria in Puerto Rico, Elon was shipping power walls. There are now 3 or 4 companies in Puerto Rico building solar-powered microgrids to replace the grid that our government doesn't care to fix. You okay with that one? No. Yeah, it's not okay, folks. There are millions of American citizens right now suffering in the dark, without water, without food, while we sit here in the lap of luxury. And there are 65 million human beings now migrating out of the north of Africa, out of the Middle East, because they can no longer stay where they were, largely because of climate change. So, okay, we know how to do solar and or wind and or the other renewables. We know how to do batteries. The electric car, about a month ago, month and a half, China said, we're going to phase out the internal combustion engine. A couple weeks after that, Jerry Brown out in California said to Mary Nichols, who runs California Air Resources Board, if China's doing it, can we? 2 days later, Mary said, yeah. 2 days later, Jerry said, then we will. The following Monday, GM announced our future is electric. The next day, Nissan announced the release of a new suite of solar on the roof, batteries in the garage, electric cars, all grid interconnected. Okay, so Tony's right, 3 of 3. How about the driverless car? 2 weeks ago, I was with Tom Chi, who designed the Google car. I said, Tom, is this guy right? Can we have driverless cars within the next 10 years? Tom said, 10? Oh yeah, easy. He said, they're here today. Google doesn't want to release them until they are convinced they are 100-fold safer than you and me driving around on the streets. We came with a driver tonight. I can guarantee you an AEV is safer than him. So 4 for 4, which means we're looking at the mother of all disruptions. And we have no earthly idea how to deal with it. We have no earthly idea how to deal with the coal workers who are out of work, with the millions of refugees, with the, never mind whether it's cab drivers or Uber drivers, they're all out of work. So are most of us. Unless we innovate, unless we build a new economy, unless we move, as Donna says, trillions of dollars from harm to healing. So this is now our challenge. Business as usual is the utopian vision. It cannot happen for a whole array of reasons. So this is both the most frightening time in your life. We are in the midst of, I think, the most profound transformation humankind has ever gone through. And it's the most exciting time to be alive, because we can create an economy in service to life.
Wow. Thank you so much. It's getting, the stakes are getting, okay. The 2 of you, look at that. Okay, so what I want to do is try to, because I guess that many of you are passionate about how we can potentially make a living as a function of positive impact on others, or how can we invest our capital, in something that is meaningful beyond an economic return, and how can we move away from the traditional donation system. So let's go back to school quickly for a moment. If you guys remember, this sort of diagram here, this is supposed to be an arrow like this, and like this. Do you remember that we have the x-axis here and that we had the y over here? Can you guys see? It's kind of challenging. But if you put the individual, okay, on the Y, and you put the public or the crowd, everybody else, here on the X. What I understand is that we are in a system that functions like this. The curve would be something like this. The better the individual is doing, the more negatively impacted the crowd or the community is. This is the zero-sum game. This is the capitalistic model as we describe it. This is the wealth concentration. This is, you know, I am because you are not, essentially, every man for himself. The problem is that the response, you know, I find it to be even worse. Because the response looks something like this. You know, it's a curve that basically shows you that, because people say, socialists say, screw that, you know, wealth concentration, you know, is killing the system. And they're right, because the most pervasive problem is the misalignment between positive impact, or negative impact really, and return on capital. So here what happens is that the socialists say, okay, so the interest of the crowd is what matters, so the benefit of the crowd, but at the expense of the individual, which is this. And we already know that there cannot be a happy crowd composed of unhappy individuals. That doesn't work. You know, you foster selfishness, you know, in a hidden way, corruption, you foster, you know, it's called Venezuela, guys. You know, that is socialism. You know, so what do? So depending on the politics, you know, we go from one place to another, from one place to another, until we stopped believing in both, because the system is clearly crumbling. There is inverse, you know, the inverse correlation between the stocks and bonds in the market, you know, that it was like the sun goes up, you know, the moon goes down. We're living in an environment since 2007 where both come up, you know, when they want. So that doesn't work, you know, the fundamentals are not there, and people are fearing something systemic happening out there, which I agree with you, it's a great thing, because the story in my mind is coming to an end. Now there's another quadrant here, you know, for countries like Syria, where essentially the crowd is doomed and the individuals are also doomed, you know, they manage to perfect, you know, the inverse model. Now the thing here is that I do believe, and I want to try to prove it, you know, conceptually speaking at least, that we can't have the individual self-interest, like in capitalism, as a function of positive impact on the crowd. And that would be this quadrant right here. See it, you know, you have the more positive impact the individual, or the more positive impact the crowd gets, the more benefit for the individual fostering that impact. In a way, why is it that we cannot allow ourselves to think that we can potentially do better for ourselves, you know, by focusing on doing more impact for the community? Why is it that we have that? You know, I was really interested in understanding why positive impact has to come as a sacrifice on your own individual gain. Why is it that we always need to make the decision between our own individual interest and helping others? Why is it that profiting individually makes us feel guilty? Why is it that being rich is a sin? And why is it that being poor is, you know, even more expensive than anything else? So, here's the thing. If you analyze this quickly, over here, I would have to tell you this. I need 3 volunteers. I need $1 from 3 people. Anybody can lend me a couple of $1. It has to be $1.
Do you take plastic or?
$1. So $1. What's your name? Adam. So we have Adam here with his $1. And then you are?
Gerald.
How do you spell that? You know, I'm from Colombia. And then another dollar over here. Thank you, sir. You are?
Blair.
Blair. Blair. I saw a movie with your name that terrified me, when I was young. And then, I still remember it. So here is the thing. Let's say that Adam, Gerald, and Blair, they all invest $1. You would say that the dollar is exactly the same, right? This one, and this one, and this one. Because we think that the dollar is a unit of value. That's what we think. But I want to show you something. Let's assume, that the dollar is not a unit of value, but it is a code that activates itself depending on who holds it. And that changes. Here is the example. Let's say that Adam is an accredited investor, a billionaire. So his dollar, when he invests that dollar, would potentially get 18 cents on the dollar on a yearly basis. Now let's say that Gerald is very successful, but not as successful as Adam, His return would get to be probably 6 to 8 cents on the dollar. And Blair, who would be just like everybody else, would potentially get, for his dollar, 2 cents. So what happens is that we are living in a system where the return on each dollar is dependent on the amount of wealth each individual previously had. And I want to try to show you why that happens. Because we don't stop to think, what is that? And what got me thinking about this was the notion of smart contracts in the cryptocurrencies. Because when I started analyzing that, and that you could really define the algorithm that would define as well how a relationship between individuals would be regulated, I said, that's it. The dollar is the smartest contract of them all. And I want to show you. Picture that this block right here is, everybody, hold on. I don't want to keep your dollars, guys. Thank you. I want to show you this. In 1933, right after the Great Depression, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt created the Securities Act. And in the Securities Act, it made everybody register to avoid fraud, which was a very noble thing to do. But he also said, and this, let's say that this block is the public market. He created an exception, And he said, we're going to create there an exception, that we're calling private equity, where only accredited investors can invest because they know better. And we're going to protect the public from fraud. So if you think about it, if you have a room like this with 95 people, and you have a VIP over there with 5 people, the public and the VIP, they all can invest in the public offerings. But only the ones up there can invest in the private offerings. You couldn't even solicit, you couldn't even advertise the private offerings because it would have been an illegal private offering by law in 1933, in a time where there wasn't even TV. So here is the thing. Let's analyze the consequences of this. Private offering and public offering separation. If you are a member of the public and you find an incredible opportunity, and you cannot register to be a public security, it's kind of impossible. And you find a building, and you know real estate, but you just don't have the capital, But you have the expertise, you're a developer, and you can possibly do it. You were forced by law to take it to the ones in the private equity world on that VIP because the public was being protected from fraud. So that also means, that imagine the psychological and socioeconomical consequences of this. This is precisely why the 3 of you get different returns, Because if you are here, okay, and let's go back to Peter, Paul, and Mary so that I can remember a better example. Peter, Paul, and Mary. Let's say that Paul is an entrepreneur, and he comes up with a great idea about how to replace fossilized fuels for a biomass plant. Now, let's make that example to be this. Because what I'm trying to give you is a practical takeaway to understand this recontextualization of money. Let's say that this guy was working, for the Occidental Petroleum forever. He learned his skill set, he has a ton of experience, and somehow he has an aha moment and he says, what is it that I'm doing with this life of isolation, working just for myself, neglecting everything else? When that happens, basically the guy will say, okay, I can do a biomass plant. Let's make a random example. Let's say that the biomass plant costs $60 million. Let's say that he can create energy for a city with 500,000 people. That would be amazing. And that he can sell the plant, once built, to a distributor of energy for $100 million. Okay? And this is an example, $100 million. We gotta get better Sharpies. And then the profit would be $40 million. $60 million cost, $100 million sellout, $40 million profit. What happens to this guy in the world of the, let me take back my previous slide. He would have to go to the ones in the VIP, okay, of private equity, and say to them, guys, I'm an expert, I have the blueprint, I can build this plant, give me the $60 million, and we'll do this together, and we'll bring energy to 500,000 people. That's an amazing proposition. That's perfect alignment of a return on capital and positive impact. The issue is the glitch in the contract of that dollar. Because those guys would basically tell you, I don't know, show me what you can do. So let's say that the private equity, how it's called, right, private equity fund, then you have the entrepreneur, you can say Peter, Paul, and Mary over here, and the crowd of basically, and I want to show you this here, I don't know if you can see, but the $40 million is the pie to split. The $40 million is the pie to split. So you would basically go, okay, let's split the $40 million. I can build a plant, and how do we do that? It normally through a waterfall, 8 to 12% preferred return, 80-20 plus a 2, whatever. You end up with less than 10% as an entrepreneur. So let's say that the $36 million would go to the private equity, $4 million to the entrepreneur, okay, after going through everything, and conditioning you and boxing you into whatever they want to restrict you with because they are coming up with the money. And they're kind enough to tell you, let's go 50-50, but you gotta put, $30 million. That's the way the conversation goes. When this guy has the idea, and the expertise, and all they have is the money. That is where, in that previous quadrant, we are in a system that rewards capital over everything else. Now, here is the thing. And the crowd makes basically zero, okay? Thanks to the most amazing law in the past 80 years, if you ask me, which is called the Jobs Act, the VIP here in this thing got eliminated. Now everybody has access for all. The problem that we have is that some brilliant journalists decided to call it crowdfunding. And that immediately puts you at the level of Kickstarter and everything else. And people dismissed it. Forget about that. We're living in an environment for the past 4 years, guys, where the public has access to the enclaves of wealth concentration in this country. Those that have protected and preserved capital for 80 years. okay? One of them being commercial real estate, which is this building that you see right here. So imagine that that VIP opened up to assets with proven track record. Not only this, what other private offerings are out in there, actually, you know, for the public to grab. So here is the thing. That entrepreneur now, thank you, that entrepreneur now basically turns around and looks at the private equity guy very differently. He says like, let me talk to my 500,000 friends. And he gets a microphone like this, you know, which is called social media, and little videos, and technology. And he tells them, guys, you need a plant. We all need a plant. We all know better than anybody how much we need this plant. I can build them. Here are my references. Ask your friends whether they want to check with transparency how capable I am for building this plant or not. And you know what? I'm going to build the plant based on what you need and no one else. But I want you to own it with me. Not only you are making this plant viable, okay? Not only are you doing that, but you are also enjoying the benefit of making an investment in the solution of a problem that you have, and you're doing it, you know, for a profit. Give me the $60 million, we'll put it in escrow with a third-party fund administrator, and we will split the $40 million profit, and you'll make $20 million. So you go from 0 to 20. And then I go from $4 million, and if you're making 20, would you feel okay if I make 10? You know, which is 50% of what you make, $10 million. And then instead of the private equity fund, we can use a crowdfunding platform, because I know about plants, and you want to invest. I have no idea on how to raise money or do anything like this. What if they make another $10 million? So essentially this means, okay, if you remember the first graph, why is it that we cannot allow ourselves to believe that we can potentially do so much better for ourselves individually as a function of positive impact on others? Because in this case, clearly, the private equity goes down from, replaced by the crowdfunding platform, from 36 to $10 million, right? So that is a reduction of 90% of wealth concentration, because 36 over 40, you know, is 90%, to 25%. And then you get the entrepreneur to make 2.5x, 250 times, you know, 250%, I'm sorry, 250% more than what he made when he was subjugated to the private equity. Now he's free to put all his creativity out there and work exclusively for those who are really investing in the solution of that problem. And the crowd goes from 0 to 50%. So in a way, there is a system that rewards ideas over concentration of capital in an interaction through technology with the crowd that can now align positive impact and return on capital. And people are growing to understand, because I bet you another dollar, 21 of the 3, the billionaire over there, oh no, you're the billionaire, right? And then, you know, that if I can make 11% return on a plant that is socially conscious, in collaboration with the community that is investing in this, versus doing potentially 12 or 13%, I'm telling you that I would choose this one any day. Now, this is exactly level 1 of what we can do with large-scale crowdfunding. We have a portfolio, guys, of $1.2 billion, and I don't say it to brag about it. I just want you to understand the incredible possibilities that there are, you know, where people can come together and invest not only in assets that were privy to the very wealthy before, but like this power plant, in projects that weren't possible altogether before, just because they didn't meet certain standard. One that is very close to my heart as well that makes zero return is the research from scientists like NYU, like Yale, like the Imperial College of London, on the potential cure of probably almost all mental health issues with psychedelics, okay? But here is the thing. It cannot be funded in the traditional world because it only requires 2 takes to replace what a lifetime of Prozac does for you. So we live in a world where we have to put, Prozac down our throats because it makes money, and we cannot enjoy the potential benefit of psychedelic research done by approved processes, and projects by the FDA and the DEA because it only requires 2 takes. Imagine the conversation, of the CEO with the board of directors, presenting, listen, we can change, humanity by relieving them from, this mental health epidemic, Why don't we invest in this research, and we give them 2 takes, and that will cure, a patient that would otherwise require 15 years of Prozac, What do you think is the answer of that board? Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Todd, can you follow that?
That's going to be impossible to follow. Really, I'm very honored to be here. I was just, I think, invited by Ken to share some of the experiences that I've had over my 25 years of being an advisor. And obviously, change is the #1 thing that we all see in all of our lives. And change, as you just heard from these 3 very esteemed panelists, is accelerating. And I deal with multi-generational families, and a lot of them are in real estate. A lot of them built some very amazing things. One of my families actually was the inventor of barbed wire, and they have a very large family foundation. And the 3rd generation, I'll give an example of that. So the 3rd generation of this family, they've got an amazing. They got an amazing board. They have an amazing. They have 30,000 people within their organization. They don't need to be running anything. They don't need to be running the business or anything. They are there to give back, and they are there to make an impact where their family has already set them up to do so. So. That's an incredible example of what we're seeing as far as people wanting to make an impact. We at Morgan Stanley started an Institute of Sustainability, and I think we're one of the first. We've been around for about 4 years now, and what we're seeing is that through back testing, there is no real difference in the returns of impactful investments in the environment and in other areas with also lower volatility. So you're going to be able to make the same amount of money that you can in investing in the S&P as you can in companies that are doing well and doing good in the world. I sit on a couple boards as well. We're seeing people that are just wanting to give back in a very meaningful and impactful way. One example I just wanted to make is that one board that I sit on out of Weill Cornell is called the Cancer Research and Treatment Fund. I'm a layman on that board, and we have some of the most brilliant scientists in the world, research scientists, that are part of our medical advisory board. And I couldn't understand from the very beginning why we are not working with Rockefeller and Sloan across the street and, Columbia and NYU in getting a cure for some forms of cancer where there's so many common commonalities in the way the cancers are actually formed, and the cells and so on and so forth. And it goes back to the funding. And the funding comes from the major pharma companies where they wanted to keep it siloed. They wanted to keep all the research within one place. And that's changing. That's one of the amazing things. And I think that the genome that was sequenced over the past 10 years has really accelerated that change in the collaboration. And I think hopefully we'll see some cures, certain cures for certain cancers within our lifetime. So, I'll open it up for questions. I mean, for anybody, but like I said, and one other thing I just wanted to mention is that when you talk about autonomous cars and you talk about what's happening in that industry, is that the language now is going from miles driven to, it's going from units sold to miles driven. So it's basically, 1 trillion miles a year that's driven by people driving cars, and that's what everybody's chasing now, and that's a good thing, right? Because that's also going away from the fossil fuel dependency.
Thank you so much. I want to make reference to one point that Donna was making, that is very important. One of the natural questions when we came up with this crowdfunding model was that people asked us, okay, what about the institutional investors and what about the billionaires? Don't they feel threatened about this? Quite frankly, in the beginning, we didn't even consider that, And when we presented the model, we work, for example, with large, very traditional families like the Cormans in Philadelphia. They are 4th-generation developers with thousands of units across the United States. And we presented them with the model, and they said, I love it. Now I can invest with you in 5 or 6 different projects as opposed to in one. And you know what? That's so nice. I'm very interested in knowing what the community has to say on how we're going to develop this and how we're going to develop that. Co-investing in that, is the most interesting thing that we could do. And we're doing with them, our 3rd building already. So it isn't frictional. There is no antagonism whatsoever because nobody's taking anything from anybody. It's a function, that enables everybody to invest and participate in different fields. We have an institutional pension fund with whom we co-invest now because we want to bring the best quality assets to the market, that we buy it together according to their criteria, and then we crowdfund them out to a point where they're comfortable in staying because they need to obviously meet the 3 to 7 year criteria. When the crowd, is interested in long-term investments. So it's very complementary. It's truly probably the solution because if you think about it, the point is that Peter, Paul, and Mary now would have the same return for the dollar they invested. So the 3 of you here, irrespective of the amount of money you each one individually had before, would team together and make the investment of, I don't remember who was the billionaire, but would get there together. And that is the way we change the context on which we relate to others in the realm of money.
Great. I'm sure there are a lot of people here who've got better questions than I do. So I'm just going to open it up, and I think you probably have a question. Or you?
I'm hearing a lot of support for electric cars, and yet I still, to my knowledge, they're problematic just in their manufacture, carbon impact, and also the impact of asphalt, blacktop everywhere. So any thoughts with regards to that?
All products have impacts. The question is a trade-off. If we go to AEVs, we would have a 1/6 to a 1/10 fewer cars, fewer roads, no parking, a hell of a lot fewer vehicles made, and so overall, much reduced impact. Now, all of us would benefit from walking more. I have a mantra of never walk if you can ride, as in a horse, never ride if you can fly, and never fly if you can stay at home, which I violate on a regular basis. But unless you want to posit the total breakdown of society as we know it today, and we all return to tiny little autarkic villages, and that means, of course, that we're back at about 1.25 billion people on Earth, which means that a hell of a lot of people die very miserably, then we're going to have ways of replacing what it is we're doing today in as smooth and non-disruptive a transition as we can. I think that's going to be the real trick, is getting out of this one without a very hard landing. And the AEV is the only thing that I see doing that in the short term. Now, if we can learn to teleport, that'd be even better.
Sure, but there are other solutions along the lines like reducing commuter times where most of the miles are put in by putting
If you have,
employment closer to
sure.
things like that, just like how New York was.
We can do a great deal better on new urbanism, on designing neighborhoods in such a way that you live where you work, having good mass transit, and all of those are superior to individual vehicles. The thing that's cool about the AEVs, think for a moment, you're getting from here to there and you don't have to drive and you really don't have to pay attention to it. You can have your group meeting sitting there in the vehicle with a little screen and your PowerPoints going on the screen while you're moving from here to there. We haven't even begun to think of what we can do with mobility. But whether I like it or not, and I'm not saying this future is the desirable future, this is what's coming at us. So if we don't like it, we had better start planning for something different.
There's somebody with a question about financial activism.
Cool. My question pertains to whether it's the role of the institution or the evolution of the institution or some sort of establishment of a new system, right? Whether that's, something like Kickstarter, which enables the crowdfunding, but essentially something that can systemically enable the kind of like financial funding model. Like what are the barriers to that? Like we had the Jobs Act which enabled such a thing, but what would get us to the next step, which is this widespread acceptance of it and being able to invest in initiatives that align with the crowd's interest.
Maybe Rodrigo. Yeah. Well, I think there's a bunch of things, and one of the reasons we were saying before that we decided to build this low-cost ETF is at least it's a way to start mobilizing people's sense of power around money. I also think crowdfunding is a really hot strategy, and I want to work with Rodrigo, and we're talking to Michael Slaby, who actually built the ground digital strategy for Obama, to move to the next phase, which is, in addition to private equity investors, bringing the crowd in, bringing people's money and people's power into the financial system. I think crypto, crowdsourcing, and democratizing impact investing, which is sort of our slice, I think these are complementary strategies, and I think we need to kind of work all of the angles that we have available to us right now. But I do think that whether we like the idea that Wall Street is as powerful as it is or not, the truth is most working people's pensions, and this is where the cab cab drivers matter to me, right? And working class people matter to me. And so the idea that all of these people's retirement assets are going to be worthless because they're overexposed to coal and extreme oil and fracking and slavery and countless other hideous things that threaten the value of those people's entire lifetime savings, I'm not willing to abandon the entire stock market right now because I think we abandon poor people by doing that, and I'm not okay with that. And so we need to do it all. We need to crowdsource, we need to make Wall Street fundamentally different and listen to a different group of people who have fundamentally different values, and we need to keep innovating and pushing it and doing things like cryptocurrencies and experimenting with everything else. But I think we need to keep building these strategies that work between the 1 and the 99 so that, as Hunter said, we can live Buckminster Fuller's dream of building a world that works for 100%.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's beautiful. I would say, you know, that if you project further in the future, I really believe, you know, that now that we understand that thanks to the form on which smart contracts are defined to create cryptocurrencies, that basically regulates different algorithm, other than I take as much as possible, neglecting everybody else, you know, and that separation between, you know, that activates itself on return based on how much money you have before. You know, I don't believe in coincidences, you know, and don't get me going on conspiracy theories about that one, you know, and who invented that one, you know, so long ago. It's very patriarchal, you know, and very feudalistic as well, you know, that's who we were back then. It's as simple as that. I think that we're ready for reinventing a new code of money. You know, and I believe that that one is going to create reward based on merit and how much your idea. I dream of a currency, you know, in a decentralized system and a global currency where you are incentivized and truly motivated to put all your energy in how much positive impact you can bring, you know, to this planet, and that you will be rewarded as a function of such. That truly will get the best out of you so that you can combine the skills and experience, you know, that align perfectly well with your talent, so that you don't need to break yourself in two between helping people, you know, and making a living.
Great. Hey. Another question? Yes, okay.
Hi, I don't know if it's so much a question. You come from Canada. Since the election, I've been going to Canada a lot. Their social security system is a private equity fund that, you know, the CPPIB, that invests in companies. In fact, they buy a lot of American companies. You know, you said socialism is not the answer. I don't know, from where I'm sitting, I live in a country where people think it's bad for them if there's a national health care system. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. We live in a country where people just don't seem to collectively want to cooperate with each other. And there's a lot of dissonance that's going on, and people are only listening to media that reinforces our set views. I can't watch Fox News. I tell myself I should watch Fox News, but I can't.
So I'm sorry, do you have a question?
So the question is, when you have so much divide here, how is this new collaboration to be enacted without overcoming people's objections? I mean, because there are people who are not buying into what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You might be interested to know the Democrat just won in Virginia.
Oh, yay.
We've bought in to a narrative that I'm against you and that if you win, I have to lose. And I think the first thing that all of us can do is to begin debunking that narrative by things that we can do ourselves, everything from simply smiling when you see someone, particularly if you see someone different than you. Just try it, just smile at that person, to finding someone with whom you fundamentally disagree and asking them to coffee and then asking them what they care about, why they have the political beliefs that they do, and just listening. Not trying to convince them that they're wrong, not trying to tell them what your views are, just listening, just being with them. One of the phenomenon we have now in the country is that there are a lot of people who feel left behind, left out, and disrespected. And in the last election, they reared up to say that and wound up getting a child in chief who has a very different agenda. And I think a lot of those people now are embarrassed, they're scared, the situation is worse than what they thought it was before they voted, and they're looking for a way out. But if you say to them, you're wrong, I'm right, God damn you, this is all your fault, how do they feel? How did you feel just now? Why did I pick on you?
And a bit afraid.
Yeah, don't mess with him, he's a billionaire.
So if we say instead, I don't understand. What are you thinking?
Not much, but confused though,
Why?
because everybody seems to be picking on me today.
You're the one offered the dollar.
He owes me about, how much, 18 cents?
Yeah, 18 cents.
So he lied.
20. It's a very different position when you sit down with somebody and you just look them in the eye and you have a human conversation. And I try to do this on a regular basis. The old boy with whom we put up hay voted for Trump. His wife, highly trained lawyer, voted for Trump. And we go watch football and just talk. And I don't try to tell them my political opinion. We just talk as friends. And if all hell broke loose in the neighborhood, I could count on them and they could count on me. We're colleagues, we do business together, we care about each other. And I think that's where it begins.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that very quickly is that, you know, I'm on the board of an environmental nonprofit out on Long Island. And what we found is that whether you're a Republican, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a liberal, no matter what you are, clean water is a universal thing. So whatever you are super interested in doing, you have to go out and do it. You have to be there on a board, you have to volunteer, you have to be part of the solution. Sometimes I spread myself too thin, but you know, you have to be out there and then sit down and have that conversation. Okay? Say, hey, I'm on the board of this thing, or I'm on the advisory board, or whatever I do, I'm making a difference doing something. That's it. You know, so just wanted to add that.
Clearly you said something provocative, because we all want to say something. So I think part of the gifts, I think, of my life is I was born into a bunch of complexity. I mostly come from European background, but my father is also part native. So I feel like I've been a bridger by birth. It's sort of inherent. And now I realize I've sort of lived my life straddling the Canadian-US border. My son was born in the US. And there's things I love about this country. I feel like the United States feeds my entrepreneur, feeds my desire to do things in the world, and rises up to meet me in ways that, frankly, Canada never did. However, I personally, from my Canadian lens, do not believe that we should marketize everything. I don't believe we should marketize, yes, I don't think we should marketize healthcare.
Yes.
I don't think we should marketize lots of aspects of education. I don't think everything belongs in the market. I actually think we need to have a really free market where we have a free market, which means no damn subsidies. Nobody gets propped up like the oil industry or the nuclear industry or the chemical industry or big pharma. They're taking massive handouts. There's nothing capitalist about what they're doing. It's crap. And so I think I'm a social-leaning progressive with lots of Canadian trappings. And I also think I love entrepreneurship and aspects of conscious capitalism. That's my lens.
Okay, so let's do one last question. And this man's got a mic.
Yes. I want to first say that you guys are all incredibly inspiring, because obviously a lot of people are here because they share some core values here, and it feels incredible that one, we're not alone, and gives each of us strength, and thank you for that. We own a co-living space actually in Brooklyn, and it's a really, really small operation. It's also consciously oriented, so this is incredibly inspiring. I want to say, Rodrigo's beautiful vision. And my question is a little bit of a functional one for entrepreneurs that are looking to follow a similar path. What would you say, almost like a quick tip or a 1, 2, 3 mantra? It's not that simple, obviously, but where to head for crowdfunding or how to get started if you have to point in the right direction.
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. The first thing that I will tell you is that you need to start realizing that we cannot be defined by what we know. And that we need to start believing that we can be more than what we see. And by that, you would have to incorporate as a sort of phase conjugation with a coefficient that would potentially create a value distribution model, where you would see how you are also defined by the unknown. In simpler words, surrender to the fact that there's some things that you can imagine, If a fish is in a fish tank, it has no idea what water is. It is only when somebody puts bubbles in there, or a little bit of blue tint, or somebody removes him from the water and puts him back in, that it will realize, that there is much more than that. So don't let yourself be bound by the ignorance driven by what we can certainly validate. Because if you have run out of answers in this system, I have too. But what I can tell you, is that there's plenty of information and consciousness out there. You just gotta surrender to filling the gaps in that puzzle of reality that we cannot possibly comprehend with myth. And you will see how that creates, some sort of an induced deja vu in here, and you don't need that to validate that. You just gotta pursue it, provided, that the standard is kept. And that means, that you're only doing positive impact as a function of making a living.
I want to thank our panelists for tonight. And I want to encourage all of you who have not had a chance to really tour this space, to tour Assemblage, to go to the mezzanine and to find the folks who will give you a all 12-story tour of this extraordinary spot. And we hope to see you again in the near future.
Thank you all.